Awesome. Angel, go ahead and take it away.
Well, thank you, Cody, and thanks to the Young Eco-Socialists of Arizona for the invitation to speak. Angel Torres, I'm here in Phoenix, Southwest Phoenix, Laveen, Arizona. I'm 58 years old, native Arizonan, native Phoenician. I go with the pronouns he, him, his. My family history is I'm of Puerto Rican Chicano descent. Um, My father was from Puerto Rico, born and raised. He passed away several years ago. And my mother is Mexicana Chicana. And on my mom's side of the family, they helped to found the Sosa family helped to found the Spanish missions down in Tucson and Tubac, Arizona. Although that's not something that we brag about to our Native American relations, but those are my roots, my culture, and thanks to my parents, I had a strong self-identity and self-awareness of my roots. And when I was very young, probably about 7 or 8 years old, there were kids in the neighborhood that were teasing me and calling me a wetback and beaner, and I had no idea what they were talking about. And so then when my dad got home from work, my parents got home from work, I asked them what that meant, what wetback and beaner meant. And my parents always told us to be proud of our roots and our culture. And that's when I learned, about, my father's roots and my mother's roots. So that was basically my first, I guess you could say, my first aha moment, my first encounter with racism and bigotry here in the United States. And later on, when I was a student at Arizona State, I attended ASU between 1980 and 1986. That's where I learned a lot of my, I guess, my political beliefs were shaped and molded at the time. When I was a student at ASU at that time, Ronald Reagan was president between 1981 and 1988. And so a lot of things that were happening around the world with the war in Central America, people in El Salvador struggling for freedom, people in Nicaragua with their revolution, the US support for the counter-revolutionaries. A lot of things were jumping off at the time when I was a student at ASU. There was a struggle against apartheid in South Africa. And one of my good friends was very involved with the divestment movement at ASU. And, he was part of that history that helped to overthrow the apartheid regime in South Africa. Students all over the country and all over the world on college and university campuses, calling for divestment, calling for universities to divest their funds from businesses that were doing business in South Africa. So a lot of things were jumping off when I was a student, and that kind of helped to shape my political beliefs. When I was growing up, when I thought I was a conservative, and then I took a course in sociology from one of the legendary professors at ASU, Dr. Mark Reeder, and he told students what the difference is, or gave examples of what it meant to be a conservative and what it meant to be a liberal or a progressive. And after taking his course, I came to the realization, well, maybe I'm not a conservative. Maybe I am a liberal or radical or a revolutionary or progressive. Also, when I was a student there, at the time, very briefly for about a year, I was a member of the Young Socialist Alliance, which was the youth wing of the Socialist Workers' Party. And one of the great things about the Socialist Workers' Party is they always had a newspaper, which I believe they're still published to this day, called the Militant Newspaper, that was published on a monthly basis. And so we were able to learn, as readers, we were able to learn about the struggles for liberation and democracy all over the world and here in this country. And I actually wrote a article that was published in the Militant Newspaper back in the early 80s when we were struggling to get a state paid holiday for Martin Luther King here in Arizona. Now, at the time in the early 80s, Governor Bruce Babbitt had passed by executive order a paid state holiday for Martin Luther King. And then that was overturned by the state legislature and the courts. And it took several years and a couple of ballot initiatives, but we finally got a paid state holiday for Martin Luther King. Now, when Bruce Babbitt, the former governor, passed that by executive order, the next governor that came into office was Evan Mecham, who rescinded that Martin Luther King holiday. And when that happened, of course, here in Arizona, Phoenix was supposed to host the Super Bowl. When the holiday was rescinded, the NFL immediately pulled the Super Bowl from Arizona and sent it to another location. And it took marches in the streets. One demonstration, we had over 50,000 people marching from the former Civic Plaza in downtown Phoenix to the state capitol. And that's when I was able to write that article that was published in the Militant newspaper. One of the other good things about Socialist Workers Parties, they used to have a bookstore here in Phoenix on 17th Avenue and Indian School Road, which was torn down several years ago. It was a strip mall. But one of the great things is they used to have monthly meetings, and they had a bookstore where you could go and buy books on socialism, and they used to have monthly get-togethers with guest speakers and a lot of great information. So that's why I learned a lot of things about liberation movements all over the world and here in this country, struggles for freedom and democracy. As far as my own background, once I graduated from Arizona State, for the past 34 years, I've worked in the airline industry. I started out with the local hometown airline, America West Airlines. And when I started with the airline, we were completely non-union. And one by one, all of the work groups slowly got organized into their own unions. Started out with our pilots, and then mechanics and dispatchers, our fleet service workers, flight attendants, etc. And then lo and behold, our work group, which I'm a part of, which is customer service, those are our gate, ticket counter, and reservations agents. We were the last group to get organized. And for me personally, that journey was about 17 years, because when I started with the airline, again, we were totally non-union. And most people didn't want to hear about unions. They being here in Arizona, everyone thought, oh, unions, they're bad. It's a dirty word. We don't have unions here in Arizona. Arizona's a right to work state. Why do we want unions? But within 3.5 months of my getting a job within the airline industry, and someone was talking about a union meeting, and say, hey, when is it and where is it at? And, I wanted to be there. Again, my own struggle, it took, 17 years, only because so many people that I work with were not interested in getting organized. But over time, many people came around, and it's a long struggle to get organized, especially when you work in interstate commerce, which, airlines and railroads, that's what they come under the federal law, which is called the Railway Labor Act, which is different from the National Labor Relations Act, where you can organize a store or a warehouse in a certain community that's part of a business, for example, like Amazon, where you got workers in Alabama that are right in the middle of a union struggle and vote. But in the interstate commerce, railroads and airlines, you can't just organize one location. You have to organize everybody who's part of that bargaining unit in that work group. So that means you have to organize everybody who does that particular class or craft. You have to organize them all across the country. So for our particular work group, when we finally did organize, that meant that was 3,500 workers all across the country. That was in gate and ticket counter centers and airports all across the country, our reservation centers, 2 main centers that we had in Reno, Nevada, and Tempe, Arizona. So it was a long struggle, because no union, unfortunately, is going to organize you unless you get at least 80% of the workforce to sign a authorization card that says that they want a union. So over the years, it was a struggle because you'd start out and maybe 100 people sign a card, and the cards are only good for a year. So the next year you'd have to start over, and maybe you'd get 250 cards, and so it was a long struggle. And trying to organize with unions that maybe they were supportive and maybe they weren't. When I started my airline career, I was a flight attendant, and I did that for 5 years. And I decided that I didn't want to fly anymore. I transferred to the ground and doing the job I do now. And then it was unfortunately, it was after I transferred to the ground that's when the flight attendants got organized. So then we were trying to get another union, the machinist union, to help us get organized. They didn't want to give us a full-time organizer. We then went with the transport workers union, which had organized our fleet service workers, which are our ramp and cargo agents. They're the ones that load all of our bags on the aircraft. And for years and years, we were trying to organize with TWU, Transport Workers Union. And unfortunately, when we got to a point where we were very close to filing, they decided to send our organizer to Las Vegas to organize casino dealers, because they basically had given up on our campaign. So, well, you're never going to get to a critical mass that's going to guarantee a victory. And what it took for me was to say, I had to write a letter to their national vice president of organizing saying, you either need to file for an election or you need to release this so we can organize with another union. And, lo and behold, they finally did release us. So we were freed to organize with another union. So then we were trying to decide, okay, machinists, they don't want to organize us. TW, drop the ball. Who are we going to organize with? And so some folks still wanted to go with the machinists because they represented the workers at Southwest. And some of us wanted to go with Teamsters because we had heard, hey, they're a strong union. So let's give them a shot. And I remember the first time I had met the former organizer for Teamsters Local 104 here in Phoenix, Kathy Campbell Tihonen. And Kathy was a former bus driver for Suntran in Tucson. So she didn't take any kind of, put up with any kind of BS from anybody. And I remember, because we were telling her our tale of woe, our struggles with, trying to organize with other unions. And I remember she told all of us at that meeting, she said, one thing you can count on is that I'm always going to tell you the truth. You may not like what I tell you, but I'm always going to give you the truth. And it was at that moment I decided, yeah, I want to be a Teamster. This is the person I want to work with. So we started organizing after September 11th. So we started organizing early 2000, January, February 2002. And we got enough signatures. We got the critical mass. And we had our election. It was in October, and the ballots were counted in November of 2002. Well, all during these years, when we were talking about union, one of the things that companies like to do is they like to hire these anti-union lawyers that come in with their anti-union campaigns. And these campaigns consist of mailings to your home. They consist of captive audience meetings where they tell you how bad the unions are, and that they don't want that we don't need a union between management and the worker, that we're one big happy family, and that the unions are a third party and all they want is your union dues. And unfortunately, quite a few people were swayed. Not a whole bunch of people, but enough people that we came up 200 votes short in November of 2002. Which meant that we were going to have to wait another whole year before we could file for an election to get organized. And that was a double whammy for me because I was on the job injury and I was waiting to have surgery for a hernia. So it was doubly painful while I'm waiting to have surgery, and then also to find out that we lost the election. So we waited. We had to wait the requisite year, and we filed for another election in 2004. And the ballots were counted in August of 2004, and we won with over 80% of the workforce voting in favor. And so I've been a Teamster for going on 17 years. I've been a union steward for almost that long, 17 years. I served on my bargaining unit's first contract negotiating committee between 2005 and 2007. So that's really my where I've cut my teeth as far as, activism and organizing. I have a lot of other experience and knowledge living here in South Phoenix, experience with environmental justice activism. We had some toxic chemicals fires here in South Phoenix in the early 1990s, and working with community members to deal with those issues. Again, in the same time frame in the early 90s, I was a volunteer for the Tona Tierra, which is an indigenous human rights organization that still exists to this day. So I worked with a lot of immigrants, helping them file their paperwork, things that they needed to get their proper documentation. And then, of course, I still have my Green Party activism. I've been a registered Green since 1992. I served as a state co-chair for the Arizona Green Party between 2004 and 2019. Served as a co-chair for Maricopa County from 2004 until 2017. And I've been a four-time Green Party candidate, running for state representative twice in 2010 and 2012. Ran for the state Senate in 2016. And of course, running for governor in 2018, where I got a little over 2% of the vote and just about 38 votes shy of 51,000 votes statewide. So that's my kind of my political and union organizing resume. And I guess the message that I would like to pass on to all of the youth here is that youth have always been at the forefront of liberation struggles and struggles for democracy, whether it's been getting folks organized into unions, whether it's been struggles for liberation in South Africa, struggles for liberation all over the world and here in this country. We can point to our own movement for Black lives here in this country that took place last year, and it was primarily youth that were in the streets leading the struggle. So my message and my hope for you all is that you will all take the reins of the Green Party, and I'll be more than happy with my knowledge and experience, my knowledge of the state statute, of election law here in the state, and what we need to do in order to regain the ballot line for the Green Party. If that is your desire and wish, I'd be more than happy to pass on that knowledge. And so I won't bore you with any more of my background, but I'm more than happy to answer questions. And again, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all.
Awesome. Thank you, Angel. That was a really, really awesome look at your background. I think that, all the union organizing stuff is something that is super interesting to me, that I personally don't have a whole lot of experience in that realm. So it's really cool to hear about that. I guess what we'll do now is just sort of open up the floor for anybody who has any questions. Feel free to say stack and then your name, or you can type it in the chat and we'll read it out for you. So yeah, floor is open.
Colette Stet.
Go ahead, Colette.
So I have a question about running a political campaign. What did you find was the biggest challenge as far as running in a statewide campaign with all the different eyes on you?
Well, the biggest challenge for me personally is that, I work a full-time job. And so it's extremely difficult to be a candidate when you're trying to also, put food on the table and pay the bills. I remember I had this conversation with Howie. Howie's retired, but Howie's run, I think, in every election for the last 20 years. I know one of the things that he did was that he would take a leave from his job in order to give him time to campaign, but I just didn't have that luxury. But one of the things that he recommended is that, if you have that volunteer base, you can do it. So one of the things that I would recommend is if we're able to regain a ballot line for the state party, is that I'm a big advocate, and I've always been an advocate for this years and years and years, is that if we're going to have ballot status, then we need to run a full slate of candidates, or as nearly as full a slate as possible. That it makes no sense to have a ballot line and not run candidates. I would rather people just to be a candidate in name only and put your name on the ballot and give our Greens and other supporters an opportunity to vote for you, versus having a ballot line and then that ballot line stay empty and then allow that ballot line to be hijacked by carpetbaggers. But to speak more directly to your question, I think the number one is that you have to really go out there and recruit people that are going to be supportive of your campaign, whether that's 3 people, 30 people, or 100 people. It's really critical that you have volunteers that can do the work that's necessary so that you can focus on campaigning. And unfortunately, when I ran for governor, I just didn't have that base. In any of my elections, I really didn't have a base of support. And the unfortunate thing was that I actually had more support from coworkers at the airport, many of them who are registered Republicans, than I had from registered Greens when, I ran for governor, which is, unfortunate, it's tragic, but it's the reality. So number one, I think, is carving out amount of time that you can dedicate to being a candidate. For you, it may only be a weekend candidate. Maybe you can do more than just be a weekend candidate, but that was the best that I can do. I think the saving grace for my campaign was that I was able to participate in the gubernatorial debate in September of 2018, and that gave a lot of exposure to my campaign. And so participating in the debates, I think, is critical. Even if you don't necessarily have the time to campaign, running for a state legislature or running for statewide office, you're going to be able to, as a ballot qualified candidate, participate in that candidate debate. And that is absolutely critical in order to get your message out to the voters. Recruit volunteers, get that critical mass of people that are willing to knock on doors for you once we get through this pandemic, people that are willing to phone bank for you, people that are willing to help solicit donations. And I really encourage people that if you're going to run for the state legislature, go after that clean elections funding. Running for the state legislature, that's free money where you don't have to ask people for donations. But if you go out there and collect that requisite number of $5 donations, depending on what office you run for, the state legislature, it would be 270, I believe, is the number of $5 donations you need. And that's from any registered voter that lives in your district. It doesn't have to be green. They can be any registered voter that lives in your district. But once you get that money, you've got about $30,000 to run a solid campaign. And one of the things that's unfortunate that I found being part of the labor movement is that the labor movement, unfortunately, organized labor here doesn't even want people who are either union members or union endorsed candidates to run as clean elections. They want to be able to funnel in all that private money into the campaign, because as a clean elections candidate, you're limited to what if you're a participating candidate, you're limited to that pool of money that the state gives you, that the Clean Elections Commission provides for your campaign. Non-participating candidates, they can spend unlimited amounts of money, unfortunately. So, but find out how much time you have, get the volunteers. If you're going to run for a state legislature or statewide office, go for that clean elections funding and participate in candidate debates. Those are four that I can think off of the top of my head. And I'm sure like if we, connected via email, I can give you a lot more information, but it's critical that you get other people that can do the work for you, helping you with the website, the social media, having a coordinator for your volunteers, someone that if you don't feel doing the campaign finance reports that, is trustworthy to do your campaign finance reports for you. So.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you, Colette, for your question. I believe we have Dan on stack. Dan, go ahead.
Yes, hello. I was wondering why you went with a trade union versus a syndicalist union, such as the IWW.
Are you talking about for organizing with the
Your
airline?
history, your history of organizing. Why did you go with a trade union versus a syndicalist union?
I don't really know, as I don't think I will give you an answer that's going to be acceptable or that would be satisfactory. I know that for me personally, I think when I started in the airline industry, we were the lowest paid in the industry. We were totally non-union. We were making minimum wage. I think my starting salary was $6.50 an hour. And so for me, the biggest thing was like, I've got colleagues at the airline across the terminal at Southwest that are making over $20 an hour. We're doing the same job, and yet I'm making a minimum wage. And the hometown airline at the time, America West, was like, well, you guys are part owners. And, when the stock goes through the roof, you're going to be making a lot of money. Well, what ended up happening back in 1991 is that the airline went bankrupt and had to file for bankruptcy. And so, any thoughts of a payday, those were gone because, all that stock was basically worthless. So for me personally, it was about, I'm doing a job where I want to be able to provide for myself and a future family. I want to be able to, pay for the mortgage and put food on the table. And so that's why, for me personally, that's why I went with a trade union. And again, we worked with many different unions when we were trying to organize. We were trying to work with the Association of Flight Attendants. We tried to work with International Association of Machinists. We tried to organize with Transport Workers Union. And that's why we finally settled, Teamsters came through for us. They were, like I said, Kathy Campbell. When the first time I heard her speak, I said, you know what, this is the union I want to be a part of. So I don't know if that's the satisfactory answer, but that's what for me it was about economics and being able to make a better life for myself.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you, Dan, for your question. Anybody else have any questions?
Colette Stack.
Go ahead, Colette.
So you were a part of the Green Party for quite some time in leadership roles. What advice do you have for the young people here who are seeking to serve in either the county party or the state level party? What are things that we need to focus on, and what are things that we need to avoid?
Well, I think the first thing that young people who are members of your collective need to decide is that, are you going to continue to operate within the framework of the Green Party, or do you need to start from scratch and create something brand new? If you decide to stay within the framework of the Arizona Green Party and the county chapters, then the next question is, are you going to pursue a ballot line? And is that important to you, being able to run candidates? And if so, then you need people who are actually knowledgeable and experienced and have been able to do this successfully as far as achieving ballot status. The state party has achieved ballot status 7 times in our party history. It's 1992, 2000, 2008, 2010, 2012, 2016, and 2018. And yeah, it's a tough road, a tough mountain to climb, you know, when you have to go out there and collect thousands of signatures. But it's a numbers game. And so you have to be able to recruit that critical mass that's going to go out there and say, okay, we're going to go out there and get these signatures. Now, of course, we're in the pandemic. Things are very challenging right now, but now that we have a vaccine available, people are getting vaccinated. They've now lowered the age to 16 and able to get a vaccination. So things are, you know, we're starting to turn a corner where people can start to feel safe that, hey, you know what, now we can start going out there and getting, you know, signatures on our petitions. And so if you've got 10 people and you need 40,000 signatures, each of those volunteers needs to get 4,000. And that's not doable really, except for a handful of people that have done it in the past, like Beryl Baker down in Tucson. So you need more volunteers. If you get 100, that means that, you know, they have to get at least 400 signatures each. So that's the first thing, is that to make a decision, are we going to, you know, your collective, do we want to continue to operate within this framework of the Arizona Green Party, or do we want to form something totally separate? Then the next thing is to, in my opinion, is you have to build a critical mass. And I talked about this for years and years and years, and it always fell on deaf ears because people said, Angel, that's too hard, we can't do it. For me, a critical mass is at least 5% of your registered party base. So that at the height, I think we had, at some point in our history, it was like 2017, I think we had over 7,500 registered Greens. So a critical mass roughly is about 370, you know, 5% for me personally. That's what you need to be successful. People are going to be the ones that, you know, go out there and collect the signatures for ballot status. They're going to be the people that are going to attend your monthly meetings for the county chapter, your quarterly meetings for the state party. These are going to be people who are going to volunteer to be precinct committee people and are going to be registering new voters in their respective precinct. These are the people who are going to be your party officers. These are the people who are going to be your candidates. These are the people who are willing to donate $5 a month to your state party so that you have a, you know, a treasury where you can actually do some work. So that's what I think that, you know, that's what's needed, is that you got to build that critical mass, and then you need to make a decision whether you're going to, you know, pursue a ballot line.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Does anybody else want to jump in the stack at this point in time? If not, that's okay. I can ask a question. So you talked a little bit about the importance of political education, especially as, you know, you were discussing your background as a young person at ASU. What do you think Greens as a whole, maybe not just Arizona Greens, but Greens as in the global green movement, can be doing to better educate our communities and, you know, get people to the point where they're willing and ready to try a new option? Because what I've noticed is that, you know, when talking with people, they're always with us on policies. You know, when you're talking to people just, you know, at something casual, if you say, hey, I think people should have healthcare, I don't think anybody should be without a home, those are pretty popular opinions. So I'm wondering what you think the disconnect is there in messaging and education, and what maybe we can do locally to improve on that.
Well, I don't think there's necessarily a disconnect, but I guess I could say has been my experience is that there's a difference between activism and organizing, that a lot of people are willing to, you know, there's some people that are ready to be the cheerleaders and go out there and march in a protest and, you know, talk about, yeah, hey, you know, I'm down for the cause, but it's a lot different for people that actually want to help move, you know, help do the work. One of the examples is that, I have a coworker who, was, one of our leaders, or was really active as far as the union organizing at the airport. But she's also a nurse, and she wanted to help get nurses organized. But she's not necessarily the best person to help lead that organizing effort for nurses. And it's because that it's just her personality, where she kind of like rubs people the wrong way. And what you need when it comes to helping to work on any issue, you got to find those people that are willing to do the work, but they're not necessarily the cheerleaders for the cause. You got to identify those people that have the respect within the workforce or in the community. And so, as far as doing some type of doing the type of education that we're talking about, it's like the $1 million question. I wish I had the answer, but I really don't, because if I had the answer, then maybe we would be a lot farther along, all of us collectively, than where we're at. I mean, one of my disappointments as the state co-chair is that after being the co-chair for so many years and being a candidate, one of my frustrations is that we weren't able to build that critical mass that was needed in order to really have the Green Party be a major player as far as politics here in the state of Arizona and across the country and around the world. And it's not just the Arizona Green Party that's dealing with this frustrations. It's state Green parties all over the country that are dealing with this dilemma. Even in California, where they've got a number of elected Greens, I think probably California is one of the few places, maybe a few other places, where they've got people who are elected into office that they're able to have an impact. So if we were able to have people that were elected at the local level, city council, etc., we could probably have a much larger impact. But as far as the disconnect, I mean, I deal with that all the time on my job with coworkers. People who are union members, but many of them who forgot the struggles we had to go through in order to get that union contract. I mean, many of these people, like I said, people who supported me on the job are registered Republican, and it's like I don't get the whole what's the word I'm looking for? This conflict, where they would want to vote for me for governor, but then they're still Trump supporters. I just don't, I can't, fathom that. These people, I don't get it. They're union members, but then they're supporting Trump. And it's like, you don't get it. This guy, he's not pro-union, but they are taking advantage of a situation where they're making union wages, and a lot of people throughout the decades, died, for the right to be union members, for us to have an 8-hour workday and to have overtime and to have health insurance, and yet they supported a former president who, was a racist and a misogynist, and he's anti-union and he's a billionaire and he doesn't care about you as a worker, but he used that rhetoric, that populist language that appealed to some people. So I don't know what we can do as far as education. I think that if we could find some projects or campaigns to work on, that would help, I think, bring more people into the struggle. Whether it's working on, what I would like to do is help more people, get organized into unions. If people, and it doesn't matter what kind of job you do. You don't have to be a truck driver, or, you can do any type of job, and that's what I want to do. I want to help help people get organized into their own worker-owned businesses and worker cooperatives. That's the type of work I'd like to do, is system change type work. So I think if we could find some projects or campaigns, because a lot of times people, when we're talking about education or trying to educate them on the issues, a lot of times for people that they kind of like, well, I'm not really into that. I don't really, I'm not interested in the theory. Some people, when it comes to how they process information, for some people it's more important that they can get their hands dirty, and it's like, that they're actually doing something. I think I saw Robin had posted something about a community gardens, and I know Celeste, who's the I think the tia or of Carmen, the tia or the mother. Forgive me if I'm making a mistake here, but Celeste and her family have been part of a community garden in Guadalupe for many years, and so I think if we can get some projects and do work on those projects, that might bring people a little bit, pull people in, and that people can actually say, okay, now I get what you're talking about when you're talking about the theory, and now we've actually put it into practice.
Awesome. Yeah, that was great. I'm gonna turn it over to Dan on Stack now. Dan, go ahead.
Hello. I have another question in regards to your entire history. So, your time with the socialist workers, Green Party, your trade union, whatnot. How much of your guys' propaganda and forms was in Spanish, or and then how much of it also was in other languages, such as Navajo or even French or Russian?
So for the unions, very little, I would say, is probably in Spanish or any other language. The Green Party, we do. I get the National Party does a good job, I think, of trying to have bilingual materials, and Celeste was very good about helping us translate information into Spanish when needed. But as far as any other language, as far as locally, any other language, including the Diné language, no, we didn't have anything that was translated. I can't really speak as far as like the Young Socialist Alliance and Socialist Workers Party. I know we did have our materials that were available in Spanish. A lot of books, a lot of the newspaper stuff was in Spanish, and I do believe that the Socialist Workers Party did have materials that was translated into other languages. French, I can't speak to how many different languages, but they did. I think they did a decent job of making sure that their materials were available in different languages. But the Green Party, basically just Spanish. The trade unions, we do have information, the Teamsters available in Spanish, but not as far as like the Diné language, no.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Dan. Do we have any other questions? Feel free. Or if not,
I've got a question.
Awesome. Colette, go ahead.
So if we were to look at recruiting people who are going to run for office, what are some qualities that we need to focus on and possibly educate and mentor? What are things that we need to see? Because my biggest fear is running people for office just for the hell of it and running terrible candidates.
Well, I think you start where you're at. So let's look at the people who are on this Zoom call. That's where you start, and you start with the people that you know, the people that you've built a relationship over a certain time frame, the people that walk their talk, the people that, yes, they do believe in the Green Party. So that's where you start. I don't think you necessarily have to go out and recruit outside your circle, because yeah, potentially that's a recipe for disaster. We've seen it over a number of years of people that come in and they show up and they're like, they're saying everything under the sun. Oh yeah, I believe in the Green Party, blah blah blah, and then we end up with people that embarrass us in the news media. One person that ran for U.S. Senate in 2018, Angela Green, who tried to run for political office as a Democrat, couldn't qualify for the ballot, then ran as a write-in as a Green, qualified. And then we had the Democratic Party, basically trying to rip us a new one, because you're saying, oh, you're going to spoil the election and Martha McSally is going to be, reelected. And then a week before the election, Angela Green drops out, and then we got Greens all over the country ripping us a new one saying, who is this person? And, she drops out, and we had people who had already voted for her who were Greens and Green supporters, and people saying, what the hell is going on? So, it's about, starting with the circle that you have right now. It's about vetting people. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people within the Green Party of Pima County, and I'm not sure how active the Maricopa chapter is, but that's where you start, and then you go from there. And then the people that you recruit don't necessarily have to at this time be green. You may find someone who you think is going to be an awesome candidate, and maybe they're registered independent, and maybe they're registered Democrat. That's what happened with our longtime leader, Claudia Elquist, who was my fellow state co-chair for many years, and she was the chairperson for the Green Party of Pima County for many years, and she was a Democrat for many years. And then the Green Party came to her and said, would you be consider being a candidate for the Green Party for county attorney? And she gave it some thought. And, basically what the party said to her is like, if you change your registration back to Democrat, please wait until after the election. And so that's what she did. She ran for county attorney, and she never went back to the Democratic Party. And so I think what you need to do is just find quality people. Find quality people who believe in the 10 key values and the platform, people who are, that walk their talk, people who are down with us in the struggle for the movement for Black lives, down for getting, helping to raise, helping, to get us Medicare for all, help us to get out of these endless wars, folks that are struggling against, youth that are struggling against student debt, people that are struggling and fighting for fair housing, people that want to work and organize for worker cooperatives. So there's plenty of people, I think, that we have in our circles. It may be only 2 or 3 people, but that's where you start. You start with the people that you know. You start with the people that you trust, that you've earned their respect and they have earned your respect. And that's who you start with. And then it's a matter of like, a little bit of arm twisting and saying, hey, I think you would make, these people, that if their mindset and their personalities, and you're going to know if you've known them for any length of time, does this person make a good candidate? Because, what they say makes a lot of sense, and then, go to your base of support, go to Cody, go to Robin, go to Rob, and then start, doing that evaluation process. If they're even open to the idea and they say, hey, would you consider registering green and being a candidate for this election? And then go from there.
Awesome.
Now, I do have a follow-up question. You keep mentioning like quality candidates. I'm just trying to find like, what are some qualities that you've seen in your years in the political sphere? What are qualities of a good leader? Do you want someone who's good at public speaking? Do you want someone who is good at going out and being an activist? Like, what is it that we need to be mentoring? Because a lot of this caucus is going to be high schoolers. So like, we want to really focus on those qualities that are going to make them good leaders and good candidates if they choose to be. But we want to focus on the right things, because we also don't want to have a bunch of really good speakers with no substance behind it.
Correct. So, I mean, in addition to people that don't have to necessarily be great public speakers, but they should at least be articulate and be able to get that message across. And a great resource, I would say, is to be able to pull in Danielle Delgado, who is, who just graduated from Arizona State, and she was part of our collective as far as working on Howie's campaign. And that's one of the things that she does, is that she is a public speaking coach. So she can, help in that area. I think you want to look for people that already have some sort of track record on whatever particular issue that they've worked on. Maybe they were an activist in the movement for Black lives. Maybe they are an activist working around environmental justice. Maybe they are an activist around Medicare for all. So you want to find some people that actually have a track record, and then kind of match the candidate with the issues, or match match the candidate and the issues with the office in hand. So if people are really big on international issues and getting the U.S. out of international wars, then maybe that person is a good fit for Congress. On the other hand, if the person is really focused on local issues, on affordable housing, on public transportation, then maybe that person would be a better fit for the city council. If the person is really focused on the type of legislation that's going through the state legislature, we've got a lot of bad bills that are going through the state legislature, anti-union bills, bills that are restricting a woman's right to choose, bills that are when it comes to tax policy, bills that are destroying public education and making it easier for charter schools to not have any transparency and accountability. We want to find those people that have, whatever their issue is, if they've got a track record, if they've got some sort of background or knowledge or experience on that issue, then that's the people that I think that should be targeted. And so we try to want to match the candidate with the particular office. We don't want to have someone running for city council if they're talking about, like, well, let's get the U.S. out of, Afghanistan. Well, it's like, okay, well, yeah, that's great. That's a good issue. But, what does that got to do with you running for city council other than passing a resolution that we want the U.S. out of Afghanistan? So we kind of want to match the person with their passion and what they're working on. So those are some suggestions. It's not the entire answer, but I think that's where we need to start.
Awesome. Thank you. We are coming right up on time, so we're going to go ahead and wrap it up tonight. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you to Angel for coming and speaking with us and answering our questions. We super appreciate it. If you haven't already, check out our new website, www.yesgpaz.org. You can find out more about what we've got going on, upcoming events, and you can join the caucus too if you haven't already. We super encourage that. And yeah, our next event will be April, let's see, a week from now is the 1st, so the 8th is our next event. I believe that one is the 10 Key Values Grassroots Democracy education presentation, so that'll be cool. Drop in for that. It'll be a good time. And yeah, in the meantime, if anybody has questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, feel free to shoot them to us at our email, yesgp.az@gmail.com. I'm gonna end the recording now, hopefully.